Okay. Hans isn't here. Let me just check real quick.
It's technically a minute early.
That's true. Yeah, we can give it a minute. I just want to see if he's online. Oh, dropped off my DMs. Yeah, he's online. All right. Just wait a moment. Lars, I liked your blog post.
Yeah, it was good.
Thanks. And it seems to have gotten very decent traction within the community. It didn't move on Hacker News, but that was mostly expected.
I saw it on the front page, I think, for at least a little bit. That was how I saw it.
Okay. Then
it might have been just very momentarily.
By my hand. Someone else might have posted it when I didn't notice. I haven't checked my my stats, so maybe maybe someone else posted it and it went up.
Or wait, maybe I'm thinking of something else. It was on my Reddit front page, not on.
Yeah, I saw it on Reddit. I'll ping Hans, but let's get started. Lars, we can start with you.
Yeah, so I'm supposed to be posting the podcast news on the site. Other than that, I was mostly wanting to check if we're good with the cadence or if we should hold off to do it like every other week, because the amount of stuff we actually have to inform people about varies. So.
I think it's been fine. I mean, I would leave it up to your judgment. If it's like a slow week and there's one thing to post, then maybe it's better to hold off.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's really up to your tolerance. If if this is like super simple for you to churn out, or if it's ended up being a good chunk of time,
we
can reduce it.
I just don't want to hassle people too much about like, okay, right, summarize your work every week if there's not enough stuff to do. So it's mostly
I mean,
about,
I guess we'll put it back to the team to how do you guys feel about doing that?
So just as an upcoming example, like if the only thing that lands is Paul's changes to the compiler 1 week, we should still put it out for that week because we need to explain like what changed in the compiler. Like it's a big enough deal, and we will likely cut a release. So like there'll even be something for people to download and not just have to build on their own.
Right.
Yeah. This week for sure, there will be plenty to update, at least around the compiler. So.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely run one then.
But in general, it sometimes takes like 2 weeks or something for like a new feature to be developed and merged. And so in those cases, it might make sense to like skip a week or something while that's happening. So it won't be necessarily a whole lot changing, but it really just depends on, whether we're working in parallel or if it's just like one or two of us taking care of odds and ends.
Yeah, I'll guess I'll run the script most weeks, and if I don't actually get a turnaround on the summarizing, we just don't have a post, and that's me fine. So we'll try it weekly and see what happens. I think that's all from me. I have access to the Twitter account, so I've been posting there as well.
Right on.
My status is small. I am making up client days on Fridays for LLVM Conf, so I didn't have last Friday. I won't have this Friday or next Friday. So nothing for me. I guess I did technically retweet some of the Elixir Mix stuff about the podcast I was on, so I did that.
Nice. So I just merged my branch, one of the bigger changes that will affect anybody building the code is that the build is now based on cargo make. So you just do cargo install cargo dash make, and then invoke the build with cargo make. And that basically drives all the tests, or basically drives everything. So there's a variety of tasks. If you do dash dash list steps, it will tell you what all the sort of top level tasks are. They're grouped together in different categories. But the CI flows now largely just invoke those tasks. They don't do a whole lot of setup and stuff themselves. That is now taken care of by the make task system instead. And the primary build is now written in Rust, so we're not using a shell script for that anymore. I haven't removed the build Lumen script from the repo yet, but I'm going to do that shortly. One other thing I'm going to do is add the release functionality to it, so that's something we can use easily. I'd like to probably refactor our build further to generate release artifacts via an action, and then run our tests using the release artifact rather than using just a regular build that happens in the same workflow for the test. That way, we have a little bit more confidence around whether the release binary that we would publish works as expected. The Linux build works now as well, so that's been fixed. The only thing that is broken that I know of is on the WASM test for Linux. Firefox is returning an error about invalid content type or something. You might need to take a look at that, Luke.
Yeah, I did disable Firefox for back a while ago because like the driver, I couldn't get a driver version that worked with Firefox. It was weird.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's something we just disable for now.
Yeah. As long as we have one browser, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if we could run tests in Firefox, but if there's something blocking us that we can't really easily work around right now, then at least we don't have to have our builds constantly breaking until we get that sorted. Is it just a problem with the driver, you think?
I couldn't figure out, it could have been a temporary thing for where like the Gecko driver and Firefox just couldn't sync. I mean, it's slightly harder on the Mac builds because I think they supply, is that the one where they supply Firefox to us and so it constantly moves? I think that's it. Like the browsers are evergreen or something. And so it's not like Linux where we can fix it with a package manager. Like it'll just make sure it's evergreen. And so it's way more haphazard that the driver works. Like there's a way to derive the version, but there's still like every once in a while there's days where like that derivation is off because like the driver teams don't expect the new Chrome version, and so like it's not published yet. It's weird.
So one thing that the new task system does, it takes care of like fetching the drivers if they're missing. So one thing we can do is have the task system look or like do that derivation and then automatically fetch the right driver based on the version that's exported in the environment.
So the derivation logic, if you look at the scripts that Circle CI publishes, because where we used to be on Circle CI, their Docker files have like how to compute the driver version from the browser version, and so we can just copy that logic.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it actually would even be better to go a step further and take a look at the Firefox build to see if they specifically, have some code that deals with that, because then we can just replicate that versus replicate somebody else's guess at how it works. Because that's probably why it breaks every once in a while. But if it is truly that just the releases lag, each other, then there's probably not much we can do about that.
I mean, what we could do is we could write the build script that instead of failing the build, if it W gets and it can't find the file, it would like say that the test passed, but like
Oh,
GitHub
sure.
technically we can add
Conditionally, like,
annotations, and so we could just annotate it some way to say that like it is temporarily disabled because the driver's not available.
yeah, we could trigger a warning based on that condition for sure. Okay. So yeah, that's the bulk of it. And obviously it contains the refactoring that addresses a variety of bugs that we've, had out kind of in the wild now since our last release. I haven't gotten a chance to go back through the backlog of everything and see if there are, tickets that can be closed out. But I suspect that there's probably still cases that will fail. Things are stricter now, which makes it a lot easier to reason about. However, it also means that there might be things that, we supported, maybe we thought it was working, but it wasn't actually working. Like a file would compile, but it was broken. And now we get actually meaningful error messages about those things. But the test suite passes, so at least everything covered by tests that have been written should be working.
Yeah, that is a good point. That right now the OTP tests are just they compile, not that they compile the code that actually works.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So we'll definitely need to keep an eye on that. So if you see anything that you thought was working that's not covered by the test suite right now, that fails, definitely let me know. I mean, obviously probably would be anyways, but
I was wondering, I saw that the CI change where you added back in the add path thing. Was GitHub not following their commitment to like supply the variables to us like they told us?
No, the reason I did that is because I'm using a tool called Act locally to run GitHub actions to make sure
they don't
that
have
they
the
work.
update. Okay.
And yeah, they haven't handled that yet. So, and it didn't cost anything to add that in there because that conditional branch will never be taken on GitHub Actions.
Right, but I think GitHub Actions will warn us about the security bug again now because
I think it only does it if you actually call it.
Oh,
so
okay.
It won't warn it if it sees it in the script text. I don't think they try and parse the bash or anything. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's important there. I'm pretty sure I fixed the bug that was, affecting the Linux release, but I'm gonna take some time, probably today, and rebuild a release based on what I just merged and publish that, and then I'll probably ping you all to take a look at it. I found some issues with how I was generating the executables that likely were contributing to why that was broken. So should not happen now.
I'm almost wondering that, like, so with the release thing you said, like, what we could do is we could do the release and do it on the same box, but we can do, like save the artifact and do another build and do it more like clean room, so we make sure that the reason why the release artifact works isn't because we're still in a work directory with like the shared library sitting around, and so we could make sure that like maybe we only do this for the actual on master, so it's not happening all the time because it would take more time again. But we would install the release from the artifact store and like try to run it, and that would catch the like Linux bug that bit us before, where like the release didn't work that way. I'm just worried that if you use the release artifact on the build box, that it might accidentally work still.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that was part of the issue for sure. And that largely had to do with the executable having its RPath set to load things it shouldn't have been trying to load. That's been fixed. And then I think also our test flow for that did not catch this because, like you say, we're building on the build box and testing on the build box, not building in the build box and then testing in like a scratch image. So I'm going to take that approach for testing those release artifacts this time, make sure that that works. But I was doing, a lot more testing in both Mac and Linux this past couple of weeks. So I would just, everything that I tested and built on Mac, I would do the same in Linux to make sure that things lined up. And that largely is why I was able to get things, so that they pass on both. But it'll take some effort to make sure that our release process is hermetic and, repeatable.
I guess how I would probably set up the builds would be like anything on master produces like a date base name for the version number, or like a pre with a date with plus date, and then actual tags, because you can set up the GitHub Actions to filter on both these. The tag ones would produce the real releases, so you'd have to. There'd still be the human intervention of tagging the release to get a real non-pre-release release.
Yeah, one option we could actually do is anytime we merge to master and that triggers the release build, and that build succeeds and tests against that, like smoke tests against that release executable succeeds, then we trigger an action that also automatically tags that release. Because part of what I want to do for the build is when it generates the release artifact, it uploads a release to GitHub using, it'd be like a pre-release, but then conditionally, if that succeeds, promoting that release into like a full release. That way for us, a release process is really about merging to master.
The problem with the auto release is if we wanted to start not date versioning, there always has to be a human involved with how to bump the version numbers.
Right. I mean, for versioned releases, I'm talking about like nightlies.
Oh,
but
yeah.
for version
I agree with that.
releases, then somebody needs to probably go in there and be like, this is version 1.0. Mm-hmm. Well, we could automate even that, but to an extent anyways. I guess if there's breaking changes, there's no way for that to really get automated, but yeah, I think having a human in the loop for the version releases makes sense, but having a nightly release, we can fully automate that, and then that gives us something that at this stage of the game we can point people to and be like, hey, every time we merge master, you can go fetch the latest nightly from here, and let us know if you have any issues. What I'd like to eventually do when we have some time is add something that's essentially the equivalent of rust up that lets someone, rust up install the Lumen executable and then update it automatically via that instead of them having to go find a release and download it and all that jazz. But that'd be more when we're pretty confident that we're at like a 1.0 kind of situation.
I wonder if we could talk to the Hex group about like allowing us to figure out how to get Lumen as an artifact onto Hex.
I mean, we can, but GitHub works just as well. There's not really any reason to use Hex for it.
Well, it more be that like that you could pull down the package. Like if you pull down the mix task, like it can pull down Lumen for you without us having to special case it. But it's just a guess.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And it would also mean like if we get Lumen on there, then maybe we could support that they could, you know how like Cargo can install command line tools. We would get it so that when people start making Lumen command line tools, they're available on Hex.
But wouldn't it be in the same way I mean, they may push back and say, like, we kind of have something like that, the archive command, the way that Phoenix installs itself.
Right, but the problem is that the archive command it's still Beam stuff and it still has like an app up, so like it is still not it is an arbitrary binary.
No, I understand that. I just wonder if, I mean, Phoenix had overwhelming support in order to necessitate the archive command being added. I mean, we can always ask Eric. It's not a big deal to ask him, but
I do imagine that it's going to be a tough argument that at this stage of the game we need like a mix install task that does sort of like what cargo install does, if up until now we haven't needed it. You know, the archive install thing is a little bit awkward because you have to specify, you know, like
the version and the basically the tarball. No, I get it. I understand that. I just trying to think if the best path forward on that is Eric or Jose. I mean, we should probably start with Eric rather than bugging Jose on every single thing.
Yeah, I mean, he would definitely be the one that would have the best answer probably in terms of whether or not he's interested in doing that. I think there is some opportunity for something like that. You know, for example, Nerves has a lot more binary objects that they need to host and let people download. But
Right.
I think they ended up going with their own kind of like Nerves hub thing for that. So
yeah, it becomes a more compelling thing if it's not just a Lumen thing, right? If it can be used outside of Lumen itself and for other use cases, that'd be probably an easier sell.
I mean, there's probably some ways that we can make, you know, a Lumen install command work pretty easily by, you know, if you specify it in like the short GitHub name format, you know, like repo/ or, you know, user/repo, then we can automatically check GitHub for, you know, that whatever we have as like a package format. You know?
Would the Lumen command itself have a self-update flag? Or
I mean, this
like
I'm talking kind of like pie in the sky. Like we find that we want something similar to cargo install, which lets you fetch, build, and install Lumen-based applications.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to how Rust will fetch, build, and install to like, you know, home.cargo/bin.
If would there ever be a need, because it's based upon WASM, and WASM's like spec is kind of like, okay, we're just going to be additive rather than taking things away. Would there ever be a need to support multiple Lumen versions on the same machine, the same way that you sometimes as a developer might need different versions of a different compiler?
I mean, there's definitely benefits to being able to have like both a nightly and a stable version installed, but the cases where that's going to be necessary are probably pretty rare at this point. The reason why you might want that is like if somebody wants to test the bleeding edge and make sure that, you know, things are working ahead of time before it's actually like a stable release, you know, lets them do that. Pretty much every language has some kind of call for that.
That's what I'm getting at. Is this a better use case for something like ASDF than through Mix?
Yeah, so that's basically exactly what we're talking about. Either something like adding a plugin for ASDF or having the equivalent of Rust up that deals with that. The reason why I mentioned Rust up instead of ASDF is because there's really two layers to what we would need. There's the actual channel, the version that you're installing of the Lumen executable, and then there's tool chains for different platforms. So out of the box, we just want to ship like the compiler with the default tool chain for the platform that you're on, and then be able to install additional ones. Like, okay, I'm using Lumen to build executables on x86 for ARM. And so those tool chains I'll have installed, or I'm building WASM applications, so I need the WASM tool chain. We don't want to ship all those in one big bundle. And so that's really what a tool like RustUp fulfills for us. But ASDF can be used to basically seed that installation for people that want to do that. But I think probably in our case, it makes more sense to just build our own tooling around that. The question really becomes, where do we host those things, on GitHub or somewhere else?
We would need Lumen up anyway, because like ASDF for Erlang is using curl, and for Elixir is using KIX. Like they're not, ASDF itself doesn't support those languages with just a plugin. They're going to the ecosystem plugin. Like curl is so important now that even OTP's own docs say go use curl to install Erlang, like in the README for OTP now. So like it has totally caught on. So I think we still need the Lumen up equivalent. We still need that, even if we tell people to use ASDF and ASDF then installs Lumen up for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be necessary to add ASDF, but if we did, we could basically make it work to the same way as like the Rust plugin does, which is, yeah, essentially just an alternative way of invoking RustUp. But it'd essentially just be an option to allow people to fit that into their normal workflow. But once you've got Lumen installed, probably you would either just be updating automatically to whatever the latest is and adding tool chains. And for that, ASDF might be a little bit awkward, although there's probably ways to handle that with like different name schemes for the version. But that's here and there. Hopefully that makes sense.
So if the answer is something like ASDF, I'm trying to check right now, make sure there's nothing else in there already called Lumen. If there's a
yeah, in ASDF,
one already has an entry for it.
Yeah, like if there's, I mean, it supports how many projects for compilation.
The only other Lumen tool I know of is basically a Laravel plugin. Yeah.
Commands are here.
And I don't think that's a versioned like command line tool, but I could.
Okay, there's no existing. Actually, no, that's not the list right there. Where is the ASDF? Maybe under lib. And all right, I'll look into it some more. There's probably somewhere out there it has to pull in all the plugins. All plugins right here. Okay. Lumen. Okay, good. There's no existing Lumen thing.
I would say the one thing we probably want to avoid is we don't want to go on Homebrew, because like RustUp installed by Homebrew can't self-update, so we probably don't want to go down that path. Like the user experience of getting RustUp from the RustUp site where you just like curl that one URL seems much better, since that one is self-updating then.
Yeah, install once and basically that's it. You never have to do it again. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if, like Hans, did you have anything for this week that you want to update on?
Sorry, I was a bit late. I forgot that this was the 1 week where we're off by 1 hour.
Oh yes, our daylight savings times don't line up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so this week I got the hash brown allocator parameter pull request merged, which is cool. And I have done, I made changes to hash brown too. Unfortunately, I don't think we can merge that yet because of the new alloc ref API. It returns non-null pointers of slices. And there are stable APIs for creating like slice pointers without creating a actual like reference. But there's no way to get the pointer or the length from the slice. I could do like a cast of the fat pointer to a struct with a C. Well, there are, but they're nightly only, so I can't get it merged into hash brown before that like stabilizes.
Wait, unstable? There's no way to obtain the pointer for a slice?
No, okay, so non-null slice.
Sure, okay.
But generally, too, if you have a slice pointer, then there's no stable way to retrieve it because of, I think it traces back to a bug in Rust C, where it, instead of referencing the implementation for the pointer type, it references the implementation for the slice type sometimes. In the way that if you have one implementation for like a slice pointer and one implementation for a slice reference, then it might use the implementation for the slice reference instead of the slice pointer. And because that implementation could violate like the having a reference at any time requires that reference to actually be valid and like uniquely like referenced. You
Right.
can't. Yeah, that's the bug. So those are nightly only right now. So something I could do like if I have the fat pointer, I could like transmute it to like a repr-c struct with the two fields. But I don't think like that's not going to get merged upstream.
That ABI
either,
will
so,
never be stabilized. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think I think the best thing we could do is I'm just creating a version that works only on nightly, and we're just gonna accept that like it's gonna build on nightly.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just the reality we've been forced to accept, I think.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, like hash brown is that's at least like a really good thing. I think that we don't need to like keep that up to date anymore. That's
huge relief.
Yeah, and then the attribute API. I have something local which I'm gonna push up as soon as like the build is fixed with hash brown, hopefully.
So just to be clear, like everything in EIR has been pushed that I can update and fix the build in Lumen and to use latest nightly.
No, hash brown doesn't. I haven't pushed it up. I'm mostly done with hash brown, but I'm finishing it up and yeah.
Can you just ping me when it's ready?
Yeah, sure. Not really that much going on there. It's just like some tedious changes updating to the new trade version.
Yeah. Awesome. That'd be super nice to be able to bail out on those forks and be able to actually just use the latest nightly without having to worry about it.
Yeah, and especially now that I get the impression that things are relatively stable with the allograph traits, because they're starting to add allocated parameters for even like I think allocated parameter for box has been added, and they're working on.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah, they're working.
Wait,
on,
does it show for VAC yet?
Huh?
Has it showed up for VAC yet?
I think it's nightly. I'm not.
Okay, we could fix all our vector usages to not just go into the mystery heap then anymore.
So yeah, I think I'm getting the impression that they're looking at the allograph trait as like mostly stabilized. So they're starting to like actually implement the parameter on types, which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good news. By the way, I forgot. I completely reworked how the dynamic calling stuff works, Luke. So if you go look in liblumen core at the implementation for that, it's quite different, but I tried to document it pretty thoroughly. If you have any questions about it, let me know. But that has got more tests on it as well, and should pretty much work no problem.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it works on WASM, the native stuff was just because I knew the Rust code would work on WASM, but if you found a different way to do it, that's fine too.
Yeah, actually, what I was going to do next when I get some time is write the WebAssembly shim as well. So right now we have x86 covered. I've started the ARM implementation, but I haven't finished it. And the WASM one should be fairly straightforward. I just need to figure out, how things will be generated in WebAssembly so that I can, write that raw WebAssembly correctly. But before I get too far on those, there are some other tasks that I want to take care of first in the compiler. and try and get some of the bugs that we have wrapped up feature wise on like user facing wise for the compiler. I've started working on adding support for compiling a directory based on a .app. So if you point it at a directory and there's a .app in there, it will use that to sort out what needs to be compiled and how they relate to each other. There's a variety of benefits for that, but the main thing is it should just make it work kind of out of the box with a given directory structure, right? So we don't have to sort it out by searching for Erlang files and just trying to compile whatever we see. We can specifically just look at what is specified in the .app. And then ultimately, we'll probably use that to drive the compilation of an Elixir application by taking the .app that we would get from that and copying that into the directory where we generate all the Erlang files. But once those things are done, my GC branch, I need to get that finished up so that that is also merged, and that'll pretty much close out, the last major compiler task for the runtime. At that point, we would have pretty much everything in place compilation-wise, and would just really need to sort out compiler bugs, that come up. Trying to figure out, what's preventing us from building things in OTP. And then I can start focusing on the WASM target a little bit and trying to make some progress there.
I know, at least for the stuff that Hans has to help with, there's still some weird class of span bugs that weren't fixed by the first fix. I mean, Hans already knows this, but like that's going to stop us for some of the OTP ones.
When you say span bugs, you mean like
where
there's an
when it tries to
exception
report a bug,
So
it thinks the spans are different places
The issue
or different
is
files.
that, say you're doing some kind of like weird stuff with macros, right? And you're declaring. Okay, so if say you have an expression that starts inside a macro
cross file,
yeah. And ends in the current file, then it's going to currently panic because it doesn't know.
Yeah, naturally the problem is
for it.
you can't reference spans across files easily without breaking it up, because we don't know that those files would be consecutive in memory. So you can't have it span that crosses them.
So what I have like as the fix is that when a like header file is included from another file, I do currently store like, okay, this source file is a child of this other file. So when constructing or handling the spans, you could like walk up and find the parent and also preserve that information. So that's like one way of doing it. Another way would be to just like don't care and always reference the span of the of like the top level file. But I think we can preserve at least some of the information in there.
One option might be to, I guess it depends on the context in which the spans are being resolved, but if we are compiling a construct where we see that the span crosses files, attaching the span to like on one side or the other, right? Like the thing that makes the most sense. So if the definition is in one file, but like something else is from another file, then just pick the location of the definition. But I guess it really depends. Like we probably need to look at specific examples to figure it out, but it might be easier to just like prefer one location or be more precise about which parts of the file actually get a given span.
So my current plan is to just like have it, I think like in the parser, instead of using the the source span type directly, have like an enum on top of it that's either like a consecutive source span or like from here to here with maybe some additional information about the actual macro. I think that could work well because then I have the ability to do a lot more, like give a lot better errors when reporting them. But I mean, at some point we would have to like actually like reapply them to proper spans for like later on in the compiler. I don't think, yeah. But I think deferring that choice to lowering instead of parsing would give us a lot better of an idea of what would make the most sense to do in which situation.
Might be tricky to try and do that work in the parser because of the complexity of the preprocessor. Might be easier to, like, as you're basically dealing with the token stream at that point, you know, fix up the spans so that it's not awkward, sort of like half in one, half in other.
The point is that spans aren't actually created in the like before the parser stage. Like when I'm talking about spans, I mean like a span for a expression.
Oh,
So
sure. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's no easy way to make that decision before the parser. But I think like it's pretty easy to like just preserve the data that's needed and sort of abstract that into like a enum type.
Yeah.
So it doesn't like pollute the whole parser.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, it affects, I think it's like 5 files in ODP, and I'm like, I need to solve it, and I like have a path to solving it. But I fixed another issue that showed up in a lot more files. So now we're compiling most of ODP at least.
It's probably a way for us to deal with that error a little bit more gracefully. Like just if we have a span that crosses files somehow, just taking like however much of it is in just one file and using that. It might print something that's kind of like, you know, missing stuff, but it would at least potentially cover something, right? Like it's not totally useless and doesn't cause compilation to fail. I mean, and there's no reason why we can't really do that.
What do you think bad happened if you shrunk the span to have like 0 length and just blamed it on the start when that happens?
Yeah, that's essentially what I'm talking about, is just taking however much of the span is the first part of the expression.
But the easy fix temporarily that I think would produce good results in like pretty much like the vast majority of cases would be to just, when doing includes, just like simplify the spans in the like before it goes into the parser. So the actual like sort of preprocessor, it just emits only tokens in the source file.
Right.
Which, in the case where you have a macro which like includes loads of code and stuff that you want to debug, maybe that's annoying, but I don't think that's like a major use case. I think it would be fine as a quick fix for now. And we can fix it properly later if we have a proper path for that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the proper fix shouldn't be that much work either. It's just like annoying. I think I have a way to make it like work in all cases pretty consistently and not like complicating things all that much.
Yeah, sounds good. Anything else?
All right, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Later.
Bye.
Take care.